We're back. Hey guys, what's up?
Howdy, gang, out in the adaptation verse.
Oh man, what do we call? We need a fan club name, even though we don't.
I had one the other day.
Yeah,
and it was pretty good, and now it's gone forever, maybe. So that's a great story.
Adaptats
is from a self-serving standpoint,
just
for personal lore.
Yeah,
I mean, sure.
I like tater tots. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a different format. We're going to be talking about a short story to a TV episode. Which is from the author HP Lovecraft, classic creepy horror.
Yeah.
And what show are we talking about today?
We are talking about an episode of Netflix's Cabinet of Curiosities, presented and produced by one of my favorite directors, Guillermo del Toro.
I didn't realize he actually introduced the episode, and I was like, this is very like beginning of Downton Abbey, with the guy who made Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
In the next couple seasons after the first season, he like introduces them on Masterpiece Classic.
Yeah.
Freaking love it. It's like a horror masterpiece classic with Guillermo del Toro.
Well, and it's so Rod Serling. It's so Twilight Zone Night Gallery. And I just love the man. I love seeing him as a presence. He's such a delightful, beautiful unit of a man.
He gives off less creepy Hitchcock.
Yes, correct. Yeah, because he's such a humanist. In such a cool way, and I just think he's fucking incredible.
What is his Oscar mermaid movie?
Oh, Shape of Water.
Shape of Water. I mean, that's not about humans. I mean, half of it's about humans.
Partially.
But anyway, we're talking about Pickman's Model.
That's right.
Which I was familiar with because I read it a long time ago. I got that really fancy Barnes & Noble silver-paged HP Lovecraft compilation.
Oh, yeah.
That I carried around for forever. So I've always been a fan of HP Lovecraft. How about you, Swader?
So I was in a mall in Cleveland, Ohio called Tower City. It's downtown, and I would go from high school headed home on the bus, and I would stop there and just look around the bookstore at the time. There used to be these things called bookstores where
Fascinating.
You'd buy books.
It's crazy. I have a fun fact about bookstores, but continue.
So long short story is that I ran into a friend who was a year ahead of me in high school who was working there, who was like, so what are you looking for? And I was like, I don't know, I'm just looking. And he said, check this out. I don't know what it is, but the cover's weird. And it was HP Lovecraft. It was a collection of HP Lovecraft short stories. And he is such a fascinating writer.
Style is so different. And I have more backstory about HP Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Again, continue your story.
Well, because he takes such a parallax view of the universe. His entire perspective is this extra dimensional existence. It's more than just, a Frankenstein or a Dracula. Here's this thing that exists just parallel to us, and it's constantly watching us, and it's usually hungry, and we just don't know. We can't see it usually.
Cthulhu.
Yeah. Cthulhu, and in this case of this story, little muncher guys. Little ghoulies that are kind of alluded to being when fairies.
Yeah. They switch the children. What are those? I forget what they're called.
Changelings.
Yeah. They're alluded to be like a goblin type changeling. Giant monster.
In one of Pickman's paintings, it depicts the family around the table. And one of them is clearly a changeling.
Yeah. We'll get into the story a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I freaking love him. I've always admired the darkness of it.
Yeah.
In terms of his writing style and subject matter.
Yeah.
My senior thesis, I had to write one feature and one 1 hour drama pilot, and I wrote an HP Lovecraft show.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
With a whole treatment in the first episode based on the Sorcerer's Apprentice. But the concept was, and spoiler alert, I mean, you guys, if you want to read it, you can message me, but it jumps between H.P. Lovecraft's real life and his stories and how they correlate together, and then it bleeds together.
Yeah.
With his mental health, which is notoriously very poor.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote that, and then 2 years later, FX's H.P. Lovecraft show comes out.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn it.
Yeah. Well, and then HBO's as well.
Wait.
Lovecraft Country.
Yeah. It was HBO's. That came out, and I was like, fudge. I would have loved to write.
Here's the thing. Show. You still can.
Still can, guys.
And that show's over. And
there's an opportunity for my show.
Yeah.
To come from the ashes.
Yeah.
Of Lovecraft Country. But,
that's right.
My fun fact about bookstores is that the binding glue for books notoriously makes you have to go to the bathroom. So you're like, oh, I'm in Barnes & Noble, and like, oh man, I really have to go to the bathroom, like really kind of fast, and that's normal. And that happened to me the other week where I was like, I'm gonna go browse Barnes & Noble. I walk and I'm like, I immediately have to shit. Like, what the heck?
That's right.
And then I was so ashamed that I just left Barnes & Noble.
But here's the thing. I say they just embrace it.
They
like,
know.
look.
Those bathrooms are nice. So like they absolutely know the glue thing.
You're gonna be here.
And if they don't know, I hope one of you is listening. And that's why your bathrooms are always a mess, because it's the glue, guys.
Just deal with it, all right?
Stockport toilet paper, you'll be fine.
That's amazing. I had no idea.
So anyway, let's talk about I would say that there's a lot of differences in the short story. Yeah, when the story is only like 5 pages long.
Yeah.
It's not that long at all. The show episode 5 is the one we're talking about. It's like an hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So just they had to expand on some stuff. Do you want to kind of go into like the major character changes that he made with the show versus the story?
Well, the biggest change comes from the framing. The story is obviously Thurber talking to his friend about this terrifying thing, both getting drunk because he's like, oh man, I just saw the most fucked up thing I've ever seen in my life. And recounting the tale of this tortured artist, Pickman, Richard Pickman, taking him to his horrible little abode in the tenements as they're described, and into this basement setting with this well. Whereas in the show, we open on Thurber, very clearly centered with a character created for the episode, his Rebecca, who is, are they affianced at that point?
I think
they're involved
in that time and age. It's like they said it in the early 1915.
I think so.
Yeah, it was like 1915, 16. He's painting her like a French girl.
Yeah.
right at the start of the episode.
We open there in flagrante. Yeah.
And it's kind of just assumed that they're a thing because she's like joking about calling for her papa and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
It's in Arkham, Massachusetts, which isn't in the short story, but it is a very strong through line through all of his other stories. So I think they kind of picked that town because he has several stories set in Arkham, even with titles with Arkham in it.
What is it about Stephen King and Lovecraft and all these New England authors who were like, I love New England so much. I'm so horny for New England. I'm going to invent a little town.
It's the hotbed for like, the witch trials.
Yeah. Which comes up a lot.
Which comes up a lot in the show, but not the short story.
Yeah.
Which is another big change. I think there's a lot of changes with this. The bones were there of the short story, but a lot of changes.
Yeah.
But you're right, it comes from Thurber's point of view. And also from Thurber's point of view, his view of Pickman is different.
Yeah.
So in the short story, he's like, I was obsessed. He was a deity of a painter.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Arkham, Swader.
Well, I think it's Arkham is fascinating to me that it's a concept that's saturated in pop culture more specifically. If memory serves, I think as a concept in Batman, for example, it pops up as sort of this dark, grim
Arkham Asylum
Arkham Asylum, because it is a strange sort of stately, foreboding name, which is kind of his thing. Like,
oh yeah, I don't know for sure if they got Arkham Asylum from HP Lovecraft.
Yeah, I wonder.
I don't know.
Yeah. It was my assumption. It was my guess.
It would make sense. Now, another big difference. I mean, you talk about stately and like how Arkham Asylum looked. A lot of the aesthetic for the show was like that. I think they kind of like crossed over the public image of what Arkham is.
Yeah.
With the architecture.
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 I love it.
Versus the short story was like the tenement hovel housing.
Yeah.
But in the show, it was like 1920s McMansions.
Yeah.
New England.
Yeah.
Which would look a little bit better.
It is a sprawling. It is this. Obviously, it's an episode of a TV show, but even for an episode of a TV show, it's in the context of an anthology. It's a fairly long runtime, which I think is the director and the writer talked about the idea of using that story as a very simple inspiration and starting point for this larger presentation. And it kind of downplaying the conception of the little freaks, the little furry little freaks.
The freaks were there.
They're there. The freaks are there.
Yeah. They came out at night.
They came out, and the freaks came out at night, folks. You heard it here first.
Yep.
But like they are far more interested in the concept of madness. I think in the conception of the madness that consumes Thurber as he ages and reflects on his relationship with Pickman, who he meets in art school when they're young.
Well, because there's a point where they make it seem like his madness was coming from alcoholism, which that was really what the other characters said, not what they actually showed.
Yeah.
Because he had maybe like one scene of excessive drinking to me. That wasn't like anything outside the realm of what a man at that time would do anyway. So I was like, oh, like, I don't think he's like drinking a ton.
It wasn't a problem yet.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't
problem.
Conceived of as an issue.
But the madness he was presenting was connected to that. And so they're like, oh, this is a problem. And then when they fast forward to 1926, they're married. Him and Rebecca are married, which you don't think is going to happen because they had a falling out kind of in the first half. But have you been drinking again? Like he had stopped drinking because he thought that was the source, partially the source of his madness. And also he stopped talking to Pickman, who that time jump was interesting because in the book, they're like I said, he treated Pickman like a deity of an artist. He was a fanboy following him around all the time. And you didn't see the falling out between them. Yeah. They kind of just jumped ahead 10 years. I was like, there's a falling out. Yeah. And then he delivers a painting to Thurber's house. Like,
that's right, because he's operating in that concern, and they're like, well, we have this new interesting artist, and like, you should really see him. And it turns out that it's Pickman.
I know him.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a couple of really interesting thematic concepts they touch on here, where I even kind of noted as I was watching it that it does feel like it is an extended metaphor for addiction. And the way that, especially that Barnes plays it as Thurber, it feels very much like someone seeking a fix, and really sort of also the idea that the vision and detachment that a kind of drug gives you is a vision into something else, like DMT or whatever crazy, like or opium, or these visions that people can have, they chase as part of their fix. Really felt like a thematic idea here in a kind of a rich way.
In the backdrop of artists, which is a more visual medium. When I first read the short story, I was like, it's kind of a cop-out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, of course you're going to pick an artist to portray something scary visually and not some other way. But it was a good medium for TV, which was not a thing back in HP Lovecraft's time. So I wouldn't have thought that would be a translation. But I really think that part of the concept of addiction that you mentioned, and also that everything in the entire episode were subjects in the horror paintings. Yeah. And my boyfriend was watching this with me, and I was like, it's an interesting take because the concept of I feel like H.P. Lovecraft may have like known an artist or sat in on an art class when he was like taking writing classes or whatever. Yeah. It's like, paint what you see, paint life. Yeah. And that's the ending line of the short story too. Like, he was painting something real. These monsters were real. Yeah. And in the show, it was like all these horrible things seem so horrible that they can't be real. And by the end, they turn out to be. It was like a fortune-telling type thing, too.
They're manifested from the works. And what I think is interesting historically about this, too, is that this is a time when artists could be more upright in the way that we see like Thurber, in that he is a very accomplished man, and probably from some wealth and obviously from his own circumstance that kept him that way.
Oh yeah, her family was rich too.
Right. Yeah. But it's definitely not how we've seen the lifestyles of working artists evolve conceptually over time, where like it's obviously you have some people working in that field who do come from money and are able to pursue it as an interest. But these are not grungy people struggling to get by. Yeah. They are deeply, And it also touches on the idea that you have two different schools of thought, where you have artists that are respected for adhering to standards and the expected standards of visual arts. And then you have Pickman, who Thurber becomes fascinated by precisely because he doesn't, precisely because he does pursue really terrifying subject matter in a very realistic way.
In different technique styles as well. And I think the 1920s was actually a time when that was starting to transition into different forms. So there was like the wealthy, elite, aristocratic art types for forever, because artists need money, and unless they had a patron, they were just wealthy to begin with.
Yeah.
They had free time to talk about philosophy. They had free time to actually practice. They had free time. They didn't have to worry about eating, you know, where their next meal was going to come from.
That's right.
And I think around the 20s is actually when it did change, because like that's when Picasso started coming up. He was a poor guy, and like all these other artists were starting to make a name for themselves that weren't rich. So I think that's also maybe a fuel for why he wrote this story.
Yeah.
Of like, he's just an art student that was dabbling in these different styles, and I'm fascinated because that's what is happening a lot at this time.
Yeah.
A bunch of different styles. I'm not an art person, but like I think Impressionism was coming up around that time too, and like a lot of crazy different things happening, a lot of fangirling over people doing new things. And then there was the traditionalists who weren't showing those things in art galleries because it wasn't of the norm.
Correct.
Yeah.
They created work to be traded.
Yeah.
And not to shape perception. And I think that I was not that long ago, I went to the Carnegie Museum of Art, and they had a special exhibition by an artist named Gertrude Abercrombie, who was a painter who worked in Chicago during the Jazz Age. And a lot of her work is very conceptually different and very abstract in really fascinating ways. And I couldn't help but think about that perspective when I was thinking about Pickman, just without the nightmarish connection to ghoulish little fucks.
Yeah. Well, eating little things.
Little guys.
And I mean, we mentioned like the witch connection with New England. I think they brought that into the story as well when Pickman's talking about his ancestors were witches, and my great-great-great-grandmother killed her husband and fed him to the coven.
Yeah.
And that became a very dreamlike recurrence throughout the episode. Ends up being one of the paintings that takes him over the edge, where he stops talking to Pickman.
That's right.
Was the portrayal of her eating her husband.
Yeah.
Disgusting. But
yeah.
There's some moments where I'm like, there's a lot of artwork from Pickman in this. There's a lot of different artwork from this.
Yeah.
And then one thing I liked about the short story versus something in the show was the consistency was these ghouls.
Yeah.
In the short story. Those are the big bad wolf. That's the reveal that those ghouls are real, that it concludes in a like nice tight knit.
That big twist at the end of the story that's really concise and really clever.
And he does that a lot in almost everything he writes. The show had so many different themes of monsters. It was like the ghoul is in there, the witch is in there, the goat head of the devil is in there.
Yeah.
Like there's so many different things, and it was just a general sense of evil as an antagonist, but there was no central antagonist for me.
No, because it reminded me, it almost felt like they were adapting an HP Lovecraft story through the lens of like Henry James. It was very stream of consciousness. In a sense, it had that sense of like, because even though it's this enormous span of time compared to the story, it really did have this sense of Pickman's work kept a presence in the back of Thurber's mind throughout his life. And when he comes back, that fear, that odd sensation comes flooding back to him. And you imagine this idea sticking with him in the way that like a fear of death was such a heavy concept in Henry James's Beasts in the Jungle, for example. And I like, in a sense, I like that they did that. But I do think that there is something incredibly satisfying about a short story tying up its loose ends and its concepts in a really neat ending. There's an artistry and a mechanic to that I think is so satisfying. It's like the O. Henry stories that are like, there's a gimmick, but it's about how well it's executed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's executed beautifully here because obviously Pickman in the story argues that, well, he goes around taking pictures of different landscapes and backgrounds that he uses in his paintings because he doesn't want to have to paint on location.
Yeah.
And then he finds a crumpled up photograph of one of these creatures and realizes at the end that it is a real thing.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, these aren't just imaginary. And he even mentions, I paint what you see, and I paint what I see, but I use photographs so I don't have to do this outside because people would bother me, basically.
Correct, yeah.
And I think it ties up so well in the story because of the one concept, the one villain, and the shortness of it. And it's fascinating because also HP Lovecraft really made no money as a writer when he was alive.
Yeah.
He made all of it posthumously. I don't even know the word.
Posthumously, however, come at us.
Posthumously, whatever. But reading it now, I'm like, that's tight.
Yeah. It's well, and that's the thing is I wonder if he sees Pickman as an analog for himself. And I wonder if he sees himself, given his struggles with mental illness, as being kind of an acolyte, much like Pickman, of these things. And I think it pops up in a lot of Lovecraft stories where there is a central figure that is an acolyte or a priest or a representative.
Or a survivor.
Or a survivor of these things who then is so warped by it that they live in that place mentally for the rest of their lives because they weren't supposed to see it. That's the whole point of Lovecraft as a writer, is he was fascinated by the horror of things we are not supposed to see. And it was something that really hadn't been addressed in horror fiction.
He actually, a lot of the stuff in this episode, this is the only episode of the show I saw, but there was a lot of highlights to other stories, like witchcraft, Arkham being in the town title, the dying cat, because he has a story all about cats eating these old people, abusive to them, and then kind of like did it as an homage to HP Lovecraft. Do you know if like more episodes are based on his stories or just the one?
I believe there was at least one other story, if memory serves, starring Rupert Grint.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, directed by Catherine Hardwicke.
Yes.
Who,
Kathy,
if memory serves, did direct that episode with Rupert Grint, and that is its own little adaptation of another Lovecraft story. It'll come to me later, but
that's fine.
Yeah, so there's one other episode for sure. Also, it's just an incredible series in general. I love an anthology series.
Oh yeah,
I do. I think it is so satisfying to be able to, especially for genre entertainment, to not have to belabor a bunch of plot lines that carry it through, because that tends to weigh down the best genre TV shows, because you have to deal with all these like kind of pointless, boring side characters and
you always resonate with a couple or one or two, and then you have to tag along. Sometimes I skip through those timelines.
And you lose perspective on the driving mystery. I think that there are very few shows, like before it broke down completely. I'd say Lost, through the first 3 or 4 seasons, did a beautiful job with that.
Oh yeah.
And even in the later seasons, there were some interesting episodes. But with anthology, you don't have to worry about those sort of nagging details, and you can have a Del Toro or a Rod Serling use the format to reflect society in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about, for this particular episode, more stream of consciousness, which I think is more reflective of us now.
Yeah.
Than he was writing these stories to be sold to newspapers.
Oh yeah.
And horror magazines, and I think some like earlier versions of like Playboy would take these short stories.
Anybody who we could sell them to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it needed to be button tight. It needed to be really quick to read from an editor's perspective, versus this was an hour stream of consciousness thing. Honestly, I was checking the time a couple of times. I'm like, this is long.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like because I was so familiar with the tightness of the original, that the stream of consciousness was like kind of lagging for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, are we done yet? Like, what's the conclusion? And the conclusion for the show is that everything you've seen in the show has been subject of the paintings.
Right.
Even Joe with his eye off was a painting as well.
Right.
But I mean, we're not going to spoil totally, but it's disgusting at the end. I highly recommend watching.
Oh, it's big gross.
Yeah, it's big gross.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was lost some of the attention for me. But a lot of horror nowadays does that. So like the most recent one would be Smile. Like,
Yeah.
it is a monster you don't see right away.
Right.
And then we do see the ghoul in this one, and I'm like, okay, you can cut away from the ghoul. It's taking a little too long. Like,
Yeah.
He's on screen too long. But the omniscient presence of madness in paintings, you didn't fully need to show a monster. I do have a couple last questions for you as we finish up. This is one of our shorter episodes.
Yeah.
Because life is going to get kind of hectic. We're going to try and keep giving you content. But
Yeah.
as always, rank this adaptation 0 out of 10. Let's start there.
I give it a solid 6. I think it is. Here's the thing. Another thing about anthology series that are great, an episode can be fine. And then you can move on to something else, and the next episode could be even better. So I think as an episode of television, and this is very, very television, like in a way that I don't mean to belittle or insult it. They made a television show. And there are some episodes in the anthology series that look different and more cinematic. This isn't one of them. But very fun, interesting take, not as sharp or tight as the story.
Very true. I agree. I'd rank it at 6, maybe even a 5.75.
That's fair, yeah.
10. Nowhere over a 6 for sure.
Yeah.
For the same points that you just made. And then because this is such an old, really public domain at this point, such an old story, do you think it's going to be readapted? And what kind of version do you think will be next? That's popular because people go for this for student films and stuff all the time.
Yeah, sure.
But in terms of popular media, do you think it's going to be readapted? What form and how long will it take?
I am still waiting for someone to do more Lovecraft-inspired video games. They've done a couple, but I think this could pop up in a very entertaining way. And I'm still waiting for them to do more of that. I think that would be interesting. It's such a specific story. I think there are other better known stories of his that will probably be adapted first. But I would say somebody will come back to this. I think it's such a short format that I think it almost survives best in an anthology format. So I could also see like an anthology movie, which I also love.
I do love those like VHS.
Yes.
And those kind of
incredible
things.
work.
Yeah.
And again, I could see that popping up as one of those.
And we're 100% in agreement on this guy.
Yeah.
I don't think it can be a full feature in and of itself. The content's not there. The concept is too button tight for being a short story. So I think it will be an anthology type format.
Yeah.
I even could see it being a short film,
Sure.
just being like a real quick 5 to 10 minute short of two guys talking in a bar, making it more close to.
You can modernize it in some interesting ways.
Oh, yeah. Just have it be like, I picture like just two guys talking at a bar, two people, and it's the same almost exact conversation as the short story. And you're like, there's stuff in the background that changes and you don't notice until the very end. Turns out one of the changelings is sitting at the bar behind them.
Sure.
Like one of those kind of things.
You said it outside of the Rhode Island School of Design or something. Like it's you. Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk off pod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
But making it tighter and simple and low budget. And this one could be a low budget HP Lovecraft. Other ones are so fantastical. They need big green screens. This is not one of those.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. That is Pickman's model for
I was going to say one last thing before we go.
Yeah.
Chris McGlover's accent in the episode. Love it. It's so fucking weird.
It's so... But it's kind of like the short story.
It's great.
I should.
It's such a weird, goofy New England accent. It's such a weird derivation.
But it's like taking a modern New England accent and putting it into a mid-Atlantic 1920s accent.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is an amalgamated playground of weirdness.
It's a big play, and I love it.
The entire time I'm like, creepy thin man, Charlie's
It's
Angels.
so cool.
Every time I saw him, and I'm like, no, Back to the Future.
Yeah.
But you're great. So nice button on your story for this episode.
Yeah.
And, check us out on the social medias. We'll be back every 2 weeks. We love you, I guess.
Love you.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.